Greetings, this is Christopher Moonlight for the very first household filmmaking podcast. I guess we're calling this episode 1. And just a few items I'm going to cover today. A few things that have been on my mind. I will be covering the question of, are you ready to write your screenplay or your story for filmmaking, or even a novel or a comic book? I'm going to be talking a little bit about some very low budget creature making techniques that I like to apply. And I'm also going to be doing a little bit of commentary on the latest Alien film, Alien Covenant. I just saw it. I enjoyed it, but I have a lot of thoughts about it. I think it went wrong in a lot of places. So there's going to be a spoiler-filled kind of, I wouldn't call it a review. Everyone's doing the review, but kind of a commentary on where the missed opportunities were and some of the baffling editing choices and so on. I'll do that at the end of the podcast. So, issue number 1. I was recently doing my social media rounds, and I came across someone who follows me on Twitter, and I followed them back. And they posted the question that they were writing a science fiction story, and they wanted to explore an alien world, and they asked, where do I start? What do I do? How do I go about it? And that kind of general thing. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but my comment, and I can see how a comment like this might be perceived as harsh, but you have to understand, if you are asking for advice from people who have been around the block, a lot of times, they are not going to have time to beat around the bush or be sensitive to your feelings. They're working on their own stuff. So my comment was essentially back to them, well, the fact that you're coming to Twitter to ask this question suggests to me that you're not ready. So my suggestion would be to read stories, read books, read scripts, take courses, whether it be going to school or online courses, and get that day job so you can work while you learn. And the person's response was very defensive, and something along the lines of, oh, that's great advice, #sarcasm. And then some friends of theirs started jumping in there and accusing me of being elitist and even the equivalent of, come at me, bro. So, I mean, I didn't even bother to engage them beyond that. That was my advice. I think that's good advice. So I'm going to kind of explore a little bit of that. Number 1, I think Stephen King said, if you don't have time to read, then you don't have time to write, and you probably don't have any business writing. Reading stories is the best way to understand how to tell them. I don't think there's ever been an author or a storyteller, except maybe at the very beginning of the Stone Age, who didn't hear or read someone else telling a story or watch a movie that inspired them to pick up a pen or get to the keyboard and try their hand at it. You need to be reading. You need to be checking out stories. If you want to be a filmmaker, you need to be watching movies. Now, I personally, I don't get to watch very many, I don't want to say modern movies, but recent movies. There are a lot of movies that I do watch all the time. I check out stuff on TV all the time, but I'm not going to the movies very often because I am very dedicated to finishing my own movie, The Quantum Terror, at the moment. But you need to be reading. And if someone tells you that and you're offended by that, then, do a little soul searching, because that's good advice. And I think there's not a writer out there or storyteller out there that won't think that it's good advice. Don't be offended by it. By the way, you know what? If you ask even if you're just asking Twitter and people take the time to answer you, if you don't like the answer, it doesn't mean they're trying to be mean. They're just trying to be real. And, they're taking time out of their day to reply to you. They want to help, but being soft with you is not going to help. You need to get down to business, So, yes, read. Understand what a good story is. Understand what it is about the stories you love that inspire you and make you want to tell stories. And number 2, take courses, take lessons. I've spent a lot of time with creators, artists that I've admired. I've listened to directors' commentary. I've taken online courses. I've had the privilege of sitting in on some college courses. I've never got to go to college myself, except for half a semester of community college, but circumstances didn't allow for me to pursue that. But man, especially in the age of DVD and Blu-ray, where there are a ton of behind the scenes and director's commentary of these people telling you all about their thought process, how the movie came to be, and then you go online and there's limitless articles and there's limitless YouTube videos of filmmakers, both aspiring and professional, explaining their process and explaining what it is that makes a good story. Go out there and find this stuff. Listen to these people. Take courses. If you're lucky enough to apprentice or have someone who takes an interest in your work that's a professional and they're giving you advice, listen to that advice. Do it their way. Do it their way. There'll be time for your way later. That they are successful because they understand something that brought them to that point. And if they're sharing it with you, be humble. Number 3, the old get a job thing. This is something, I think, when I was 16 years old, I got a job at a comic book store. After that, I got a job at a Robinson's Mate, which is a retail department store. And then after that, I tried my hand at Hot Topic. That didn't work out very well. But then I worked for a store called the Museum Company. And, it's like I've had a day job the entire time I've created. And sometimes I didn't like it, Even, a couple of years back, I was working at AMC Theater, sweeping popcorn out from underneath theater seats. By that time, I had learned not to resent the day job. A day job is a very good thing. And as a creator, it's not just about making sure you're paying your bills. But, when you have a day job, you are interacting with people. You're part of a team. You are learning the dichotomy of people. You get to experience different people, different points of view, different hardships, different ways of life. These are all things, experiences that are vital for you to understand, for you to have. You can't just write in a bubble. You can't be in a vacuum and understand how characters work, and characters are your story. So, if you're creating, I think these are very important things, It's very nice to hear these stories of these young people who just kind of, got out of high school and had their first big hit, and then boom, they're creating, and, it's crazy. But, you find a lot of these people who are success stories later on in life, their movies kind of falter. It's like they only had one story in them. And I think that the people who kind of get going later in life after they've had some time, you look at, I was just watching an interview between Robert Rodriguez and Sylvester Stallone, and he was talking about all the Rocky sequels and the thought process behind them. And Sylvester Stallone, he really worked hard and did a lot of things that he probably didn't want to do but had to do in order to get to where he was. But by the time he was writing his scripts, His scripts were remarkable because he was pulling from his experiences in real life, people he knew, his own hardships. Working a day job, there's no shame in it. And as a matter of fact, I think there's a lot of people these days, I forget who it was, and forgive me if that person is listening to this podcast, but they're a makeup artist, or was it a filmmaker or a makeup artist? I can't remember. Anyway, he said, he was doing a convention, and he says, people walk up to me all the time and say, hey, if somebody just handed me like that nice expensive camera, I could make that really great movie. And he's like, no one's going to hand you that camera. You've got to work your way up. You've got to pay your dues. And even when you think you've paid your dues, that's no guarantee that people are going to suddenly start handing you jobs, or handing you responsibilities. You have to prove yourself, and usually you have to prove yourself in achieving something on your own before anyone will trust you with their money, with their camera equipment. So, if you believe, and this sounds harsh, but people are going to be harsh with you, and they're not going to be harsh with you because they want to be elitist, as I was accused of being, or they want to be cruel or condescending. It's because if people are soft with you, you're not going to learn. You're just, it's like honing the blade of a sword. The blacksmith is not going to go easy on hammering that sword against the anvil. You gotta take your knocks. You gotta understand, so you hone your skills. But I truly believe, if you do not believe that reading all the time the stories you love and watching movies and taking courses and working a day job are the key to you becoming successful, then all I can say is get used to failure and get used to not understanding why, because you are turning away from the very thing that is going to make you good, is going to make you successful. And if you think that you have to turn to social media to say, look at me, I'm going to write a story, what do I do? If the question is, what do I do? Then you're not ready. Because these people who are successful, when they sit down to write, they have very clear ideas of what needs to be done. They have very clear ideas of what their own vision is. And they set to work in structuring it and honing it and making sure that it's perfect, because they've been reading and they've been working and they've been listening to the advice of the people who came before. So, if somebody's harsh with you and you don't like it, just suck it up. Say thank you for your advice. You don't have to like it. You can disagree with it, but that person has taken their time. Maybe sometimes they will be condescending or snide or whatever, but still, just understand that they obviously know something that got them to the place that they are, and they're sharing it with you, and that is a gift. So don't get mad, because if you can't take that little bit, then I guarantee you the things further down the road are just going to knock you flat on your ass, and you're really not going to like that. And there are people who can take this. They're going to get ahead of you, and they're going to get all the things that you want, and you're just going to be left wondering why. So that is the first point, the first topic today on the podcast. And wasn't that fun? Anyway, having fun on being everyone else is asleep. This is a midnight podcast. That's why I'm talking so low. Normally I'd be talking like Jack Burton on a dark and stormy night. Someone puts the back of your favorite head up against the wall and asks if you paid your dues, Jack. You just look that gorilla right in the eye and say, yes, sir, the check is in the mail. Okay, so topic 2, creating creatures. There's a little really fun, very inexpensive material that is available to everyone. That if you're not working in a creature shop and you can't make mold, and you can't cast molds, you can't sculpt and that sort of thing, very fun, cheap material, and there's plenty of tutorials about how to do it on the internet. And I'm gonna do my own tutorials later in the year to kind of really demonstrate visually how I handle this particular material. But it's one that I'm dealing with right now because I am packing for a move. I'm moving from Austin, Texas back to my home state of California. And you're thinking like, oh, he's talking about cardboard. No, I'm talking about my very favorite material, packing tape. Okay, so here's the deal with packing tape. Packing tape is rigid when you build up on it. So there's a creature in the quantum terror. I call it the Jabberwocky, and it's kind of like this bulbous creature with this long neck and these mandibles and these tentacles and spindly legs that I attach to it. And I use all sorts of bits of foam and rods and Sculpey for the mandibles, and I put springs in the Sculpey so I could pull strings and they would be spring back. But the body itself, I needed something that would retain that shape. So I just took one of my kids' dodgeballs and I put a coffee can on the dodgeball, and I wrapped everything in saran wrap. And the saran wrap kind of like clings to it. And then I packed packing tape all around this saran wrap, and I just kept packing this bits of packing tape all around it until it became rigid enough that I could cut a slit in it and pull out the dodgeball and pull out the coffee can, but it retained the shape, and it kind of looked like this bulbous kind of phallic creature. And then I was able to take other material and add like a face to it and little puppet mechanisms and that sort of thing. But I use this material for several things in the quantum terror where otherwise I would have had to sculpt a creature in clay, cast it in fiberglass, poured a mold, but it would have been really expensive, where I just ended up spending, I don't know, to build it, I think between the Sculpey and the packing tape and the other materials, I probably spent around $30 to make this creature. And it turned out really nice, if I do say so myself. I mean, for a very micro-budget movie, it's a pretty cool, intense-looking creature, and we used it a lot. I also did some miniature puppets. There's a character that splits open, and you see their skeleton inside. And I just took this Spider-Man figure. It's about, I don't know, I would say it's about a foot high, maybe a little less. Spider-Man kind of in an action pose. And I wrapped him in saran wrap. And the saran wrap's to keep the packing tape from clinging to the shape that you're trying to get. But, I just wrapped Spider-Man in saran wrap and packed packing tape all around. And then I cut through there and I pulled Spider-Man out, and the packing tape retained the shape. And I took like a little rubber skeleton from the Halloween store and I stuffed it in there, and we added all this gore. And Jenna Green, my practical effects person, she painted it up, and it worked really well. We put some tentacles, we put some earthworms in there as well, so it looked like its intestines were wriggling around. And we also had, for our actresses, they had to wear corsets for a particular scene. We wanted the corsets to kind of look like they were made out of this weird alien skin. So we actually wrapped our actresses in saran wrap and packing tape all around them, so it was kind of the shape of their bodies. Then we put them on and they can wear it. It gets a bit sweaty, but anyway, we packing tape, like I said, if you put saran wrap around an object and you pack packing tape around it, just try it with your kids. If you've got kids, or if you don't have kids, but maybe you're an aunt or an uncle, or you've got younger siblings, take one of their, experiment with like a teddy bear. Another fun thing that I did was I took a bowl, and I did it with a bowl, and then I pulled the bowl out, and then I put like strips of cling wrap and bubble wrap, and then made a jellyfish. So there's a lot of things you can do with packing tape because it retains that rigid shape. But it was an invaluable tool for the quantum terror. So look up packing tape sculpture on Google. Look it up on YouTube. There's lots of tutorials how to do it. I have a particular way of doing it myself, and how I incorporate it with different practical effects puppet mechanisms, and I coat it in latex, and we paint it a certain way. So there's different ways to do it. And there are other cheap materials I'll talk about in other podcasts later on. So that is point 2 in the podcast. So now I want to talk about this. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the point we've all been working for. Alien Covenant, where we have the android David and the android Walter. There's going to be spoilers here. This is my best impersonations. I like to do impersonations, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Okay, so Alien Covenant. Ridley Scott, when he came out with Alien, he kind of described it as like, he had several descriptions for it. He called it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space. He called it the old dark house, the haunted house story, where, you know, if people were in a haunted house, the question would always be, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just leave the haunted house? And that's that. And he kind of answered that question and said, well, if you're in outer space, you can't leave. It's a vacuum out there, and the alien's going to get you. So I think that, that was a brilliant movie. And I think James Cameron, he followed up with an amazing, satisfying story. If Alien was about surviving a horror, then Aliens was about how you kind of come back and confront that horror and learn to overcome it and kind of redeem yourself. And, you know, there's the theme of motherhood with Newt. And, you know, it's actually a very hopeful kind of action / sci-fi / horror movie, you know, where it's kind of, you know, she's lost her family, she's lost her daughter, and now she's kind of regaining her family and she's regaining hope. And, you know, I'm just going to straight out say I'm not a fan at all of Alien 3. And, you know, the reason that I feel that way is because where Aliens becomes very hopeful, you know, it ends on a note of hope. And I think that, you know, good horror for me, and this is something that I think a lot of people would disagree with, but I think that good horror is actually, it's an exercise for the audience in showing that there are ways to survive horror and even gain hope. And, you know, it was a great kind of like 80s movie. It was a very, you know, about family, and it was about regaining your sense of self and moving forward. And then the 90s came along and everything was kind of postmodern, nihilistic, existential, and it kind of spat in the face of that. You know, I really felt that Alien 3 was kind of spitting in the face of this idea that the family unit was important. I'm a family man. I have daughters. I'm very happily married, and you know, I love my family, and I'm a very hopeful person. And I love horror, and I love sci-fi, and all that sort of thing. But you know, it's like Alien 3 kind of spit in the face of that and just said like nothing matters. You know, it's all, you know, we're just gonna kill them off. And David Fincher was like, you know, this is my movie. I'm gonna do it my way, and I can appreciate that. But I think what really kind of made Aliens great was James Cameron looked at the original Alien and he said, I'm going to stay within the logic of this universe that Ridley Scott established, and I'm going to keep a visual continuity, and I'm going to take Ripley as a character, and I'm going to expand her and explore what thematically the events of the first movie would mean to her. And then you get into Alien 3, and it's kind of very dramatic, and the acting is, you know, it's good acting, but it's just kind of like, it's kind of got this community theater vibe where everybody's very verbose. Everyone's very kind of like speaking from the chest. There are these sermons, and, you know, and it suffers from this thing where it's like, it almost says like, any character that is interesting, Newt Hicks, we're going to kill. As soon as the Doctor starts to get interesting, they kill him off. I'm not even going to get into Alien Resurrection. It's just silly. And I'm going to express the very unpopular view of, I don't like Joss Whedon's work at all. I don't see the appeal. I've never understood why people like Joss Whedon. I've never been into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was one of many writers in Toy Story, so I don't really give him credit for that. He may have had some contributions with some witty dialogue, but it's another issue, this trend of witty dialogue trying to pass for good storytelling, and it's just not. And so why am I talking about this? How does this relate to Alien Covenant? A couple of things that I felt were interesting about Ridley Scott revisiting the Alien franchise, first with Prometheus and then with Alien Covenant, is that it almost seemed like he was answering both visually and thematically all of these sequels that came after. It's like an Alien Resurrection if Sigourney Weaver did the over-the-shoulder, behind-the-back shot, which had no reason to be in an Alien movie to begin with. Then Ridley Scott shows David riding a bike and shooting baskets. It's kind of like visual answer. Or if, in Aliens versus Predator, when they're all gathering to figure out, or to wait for Lance Henriksen to tell them all why they're there, and they're all sitting in folding chairs, and then he comes and, does his little presentation with his little head microphone, then Ridley Scott shows that in Prometheus. So there's kind of like, it's like he watched the movies. I don't know if he did watch them or not, but it does seem like he's kind of answering them in some way and going, well, this is how I would do it. And I did enjoy Prometheus. I thought Prometheus was actually a really interesting movie. I will say, and I will not, I won't take credit for this, as someone else I saw on Facebook saw this, and I apologize, I don't know or remember who it was. It was someone in a Facebook group, but somebody said Ridley Scott rebooted the Alien franchise with Prometheus and Alien Covenant and just neglected to tell us. And I absolutely agree with that, because continuity-wise, when you look at the androids from Alien and Aliens, the androids in Alien Covenant are far more advanced. They do things that are just way beyond what the Alien and Aliens androids do. And there's just no way that those would be the earlier models. They're healing, and they're having their heads ripped off, and they're still talking. They're still conscious, where we see in the first Alien, the android gets his head knocked off and he's out. So, it's just kind of, it's a bit much to say that those are canon with the original two movies. And to me, it's like, the first two movies, they're it. I don't see Alien 3 or Alien Resurrection as canon. I don't see the Aliens versus Predator movies as canon, and I don't see these as canon. Or if, whatever you want to call canon. They're all their own separate universes. Anyway, going back to the theme of the old dark house, the haunted house. If Alien is the haunted house, then Alien Covenant is the mad scientist at the top of the hill, the Dr. Frankenstein story. And I will actually get a little more specific. If the original, and I'm talking about Mary Shelley Frankenstein here. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein inspired the James Whale's Frankenstein. But before that, H.G. Wells was inspired by Frankenstein and wrote The Island of Dr. Moreau, and that's what Alien Covenant really is. What we're seeing is a Aliens version of The Island of Dr. Moreau, and David is Dr. Moreau. It's the same principle, except, you have the lifeboat in Dr. Moreau coming in, and he gets picked up and he gets taken to this island. You have these colonists, and they pick up the signal, and they go and they find... Same thing. They find David as Dr. Moreau experimenting on these things, and it's just kind of, it's a very interesting idea, and I think there's some very interesting ideas in there with the, March into Valhalla being played at the beginning on the piano and being told it's a bit anemic, and then hearing the symphony at the end, showing that David is, feels like he's gone from being this anemic character to this full verbose character that can march into Valhalla. But I want to talk about some missed opportunities here. because you know, this is something that a lot of the reviews have been saying. None of the characters are fleshed out in any kind of interesting way. I felt that David and Walter were interesting, but to me, there were characters that I really wish, you know, if we would have seen them more fleshed out and maybe not just killed off. We don't need to see every character killed off. You know, we've seen that before. We don't need to do that every time. I felt that the captain was a very interesting character, or he was killed off just when he was starting to get interesting. And he has this great line he tells David, and if you know, I'm hoping everyone's seen the movie at this point, but when he's pointing his gun at David after he's found that woman that got her head bit off, and he finds David trying to kind of tame this neomorph, and he shoots the neomorph, and he points the gun at David, and he says, I think, what do you say? I saw the devil when I was 6 years old, or when I was a child, or something like that, and I never forgot him. And as I heard that line, and I went, well, that's interesting. Let's hear more about that. I want to hear more about who this guy is, what is motivating him, what's motivating his faith, and how his faith might play into expanding his character and maybe defeating David. David doesn't have to kill everybody. They don't have to kill everyone. You know, it's, you know, so we see, and then he wakes up after having the face hugger on him, which, why would anyone trust David at that point and just bend over an alien egg, whether you've ever seen one or not? You're watching the movie going, have you ever seen, like Guy in Galaxy Quest, have any of you ever watched the show? So I would have liked to seen that character live, be a bit more expanded on. I think that would have made the movie far more interesting. So that's one of the points. And by the way, you know, I did enjoy the movie. You know, I think Ridley Scott, even when he makes a bad movie, what he does as a director is infinitely more interesting than what most directors are doing these days. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend for a moment that my own movie that I'm coming out with is going to be any better. I mean, I'm trying to make it be as good as it can be. And I hope I don't fall into these pitfalls, but you know, it's like every director is fallible, and you know, everyone sees the flaws in somebody else's work. Now, rewinding back a little bit, the girl that got her head bit off by the neomorph, I don't know who she was. I didn't know anything about her, and I was thinking to myself, you know, 2 points. One, if I would have learned who she is, I would have cared about her. And two, again, I think it would have been much more interesting if that neomorph, instead of her just turning around and her seeing it standing there and then attack her, what if she turned around and she was able to dodge it? What if that became a suspenseful scene about her surviving, about her fighting for her life? That would have been far more interesting to me as a viewer, and I think would have taken the basic formula of the alien just like picking people off one at a time and turned it on its head. I think, you know, again, this whole idea of the alien covenant being like the island of Dr. Moreau, I mean, it's off to a great start. Yes, it was kind of, you know, promising to go into an unconventional direction. So, you know, again, why do characters just have to get picked off one by one? A big pet peeve of mine, the whole slasher film vibe of it, with the, you know, like the shower scene, like something you'd see in Friday the 13th, and then the alien teeth coming out of the guy's mouth. You know, at that point, you're just getting perverse. You know, you're just getting kind of gross and gratuitous and mean-spirited, and it's not frightening. A matter of fact, it's kind of, it feels like it feels like Ridley Scott is pandering to that slasher film audience, which I don't think is actually who is showing up for these alien movies. I'm not a fan of Freddy and Jason. Never have been. And I don't want to see that. I'm not coming to an Aliens movie for that. I'm not coming to an Aliens movie for gore. I'm coming for suspense. I'm coming for mystery. You know, and many critics will talk about how, you shouldn't show the whole alien, and I agree with that entirely. And I was really disappointed to see CGI used so heavily when I think a person in a suit or an animatronic just showing bits and pieces would have really taken us back to what people love about the franchise. People don't want to see it running around like a velociraptor. But anyway, again, I'm going off on a tangent. Going back to the girl who got her head bit off. You see her get attacked, and then you see her head floating in this basin of water. And then you see the captain looking for her, and he comes across her head floating in a basin of water. And then someone goes looking for the captain, and he comes and sees the head floating in the basin of water. That's 3 times you've shown the head in the basin of water. And the first time was not effective because no one was discovering it. You were just showing it. You should just show that head one time. And I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, it was a good horror moment, and it was absolutely wasted because it was just shown to us. If the captain had been looking for her and walked in and discovered it in the same way that Ripley discovered Lambert and Parker at the end of Aliens, or at the end of Alien, the original, and kind of had that involuntary shudder, that would have been horrific. And then you wouldn't have needed to show it a 3rd time. You just get to show it once. Show it 3 times, you're just being perverse. It's not scary. It gets to be a bit annoying, a bit silly. Let's see, what else? Okay, the point of Walter versus David, I thought that was very interesting, but instantly became cliche. I mean, we've seen it done before, the old switcheroo, the twin masquerading as the other twin, or in Star Trek The Next Generation, Lore masquerading as Data. And as soon as you see that cutaway, will Walter kill David, won't he? And then it cuts away, and then the next shot you see him, running off towards the spaceship. It's David. There's no surprise there. And then even when he's putting her in cryo sleep, you see it coming a mile away, and it's cliche. What would I have done? I would have, after the alien was gone off the ship, I would have had that second, like in Aliens, they escape, they get off the planet, there's the nuclear explosion, they think they're safe, and then the Queen is on board. So in Alien Covenant, they kill the alien. They blow it out the airlock for the umpteenth time. They got to come up with better ways to kill aliens. The big twist is not a fight with an alien queen. It's it's her realizing that Walter is not there and it's David, which should have been apparent as soon as he was stapling his face, because we know from before that his skin heals up right away. I would have had Walter come back. He's still got the Juggernaut ship. Walter finds his way back to the Juggernaut ship, manages to, this might be a bit much, but Walter manages to fly the Juggernaut ship back to the Covenant and gets back onto the Covenant and saves Daniels for that last time. That would have been interesting. Yeah, there wouldn't have been the cliffhanger. Again, another pet peeve of mine, and I think this might have to do with the whole Netflix, Amazon, binge-watching series things. It's like movies don't have endings anymore. They just have cliffhangers, and they're treating the movies the same way they're treating the series. And I kind of have a problem with this binge-watching mentality. You just watch one after the other, I was just watching on Cartoon Network the renewed final season of Samurai Jack. I was having a great time because they were just coming out one each weekend. You couldn't binge watch it, and you took each episode, and you absorbed it. And after it was over, you get to think about the artistry of it and the storytelling, and it was wonderful. I wouldn't have wanted to binge watch that to save my life. Anyway, it's like, I think movies need to be complete stories. Enough of this cliffhanger, enough of this kind of ending on that cliffhanger note. Even as much as I complain about the J.J. Abrams Star Wars Force Awakens, it kind of ended on a cliffhanger, but at least you got a complete movie with a sort of beginning, middle, and end, as messy as it was and as fan servicey as it was. So, Alien Covenant, yes, I did enjoy it, but I felt like there were things Ridley Scott did that at his age, you think to yourself, why on earth? It's like he forgot how to make good movies after a certain point. These things that if you saw them in a film class, you would tell the student, like, go back and edit that. You can't show the head and the basin 3 times. It's not scary. You get one time, make it the best time, make it count. So I don't know, I think Ridley Scott has been very lucky in his career. When he first did Alien, that he had, it wasn't just him. It was him, and it was H.R. Giger, and it was Dan O'Bannon, and it was all these different kind of this perfect storm. And Blade Runner, but I see Blade Runner as a flawed movie, but he had some great actors, and there was some great improv in there. But it's like he's a great visual director, and I love listening to him talk. But I think he gets the idea. From listening to his interviews, I get the idea that he's very much assured in himself that he has it all worked out, and anyone that questions him, he's like, no, I've got movies in the Library of Congress, I know what I'm doing, I'm Ridley Scott, and like, shut up, just let me do it. But I think for even the best of directors need to hear no sometimes. So Alien Covenant, I highly recommend that people watch it. I think that it's a good movie to watch. Really, where Ridley Scott is strong, he's really strong. And that shows in Alien Covenant. And where he's weak as filmmakers, even for little independent backyard features, household filmmaking, we can learn from that. I could go on. Like I said, this wasn't really a review of Alien Covenant. This is more of just kind of picking at little points that I feel like as filmmakers, we should expect better. And if we're making our own films, we should look at those things and go, okay, that's exactly what I don't want to do. But again, I like that it was the island of Dr. Moreau. I like the little themes in there. I think that head floating in the basin was both like my favorite horror moment and also the most missed of opportunities. But ultimately, here's my opinion. Yes, if another Aliens movie gets made, I will watch it. I hope they wrap it up. I hope they don't end it on another cliffhanger. I want to see what happens. I think Michael Fassbender is a amazing actor, and the David Walter guy. I hope we get to see Walter back too. I really liked Walter. But I really also feel like it's time to wrap these up. All these franchise movies that have been around, Star Trek's been around for 50 years. Star Wars has been around for 40 years. Alien has been around for almost 40 years. It's kind of, these movies need to have a dignified exit, and then we need to move on to something else. Not just for the fact that, they keep making them and they kind of keep getting in the way of other movies, but they're having a negative impact, a negative influence on all of us as filmmakers. We watch them, we see them over and over again. We can't help but have them in our psyche. And I think they're kind of, it's like playing music too loud, or having a little kid talking in the side of your ear while you're trying to think. It's distracting us from having new ideas. So, I'm simultaneously saying they're distracting us and also saying watch it so you can see the things that, should be handled better. But anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Appreciate you listening, and I'd love to hear your comments. You can also find me on Patreon. That is patreon.com/Christopher Moonlight. I am going to be hopefully next week interviewing the special effects artists at Odd Studio who handled the practical effects for Aliens Covenant. I think those were pretty cool, and I'm really looking forward to talking to them. So fingers crossed their schedule will allow. We have it marked on the calendar, but we keep having to push it back. These special effects artists are busy, so it takes some time. But anyway, Thank you very much for listening. This is Christopher Moonlight for Household Indies Podcast number 1. I will be back with more thoughts in the next episode and hopefully also bringing you some interviews with some other filmmakers. Have a good one.